Welcome to Magician Recaps Explains. In 1937, a few years before the start of World War II, the U.S. naval attaché in Tokyo and his counterpart discussed the U.S. and Japanese positions in the Pacific Ocean during a state function. Isoroku Yamamoto, Atsushi Toyokawa, Commander-in-Chief Combined Fleet, quietly informs Intelligence Officer Edwin T. Layton, Patrick Wilson, Intelligence Officer U.S. Pacific Fleet, that they will take action if their oil supplies are threatened. On the morning of December 7, 1941, the Japanese used their carrier fleet to strike at Pearl Harbor. The attack leads the U.S. to enter World War II. Shortly thereafter, a command shakeup occurs at Pearl Harbor as Admiral Chester Nimitz, Woody Harrelson, Commander-in-Chief U.S. Pacific Fleet, takes in charge. Layton discusses with Nimitz over his failure to convince Washington of the impending attack on Pearl Harbor. Nimitz commands him to stick to his guns in the next battle with Washington, so as to avoid a repeat of the unexpected attack at Pearl Harbor. Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey, Luke Evans, Air Group Commander, USS Enterprise, is on his ship 170 miles from Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. Due to this, the U.S. carrier fleet spared the attack from the Japanese and prevent them from completing a major strike objective, thus to get the U.S. carriers. Aviation machinists mate Bruno Gato, Nick Jonas, Lieutenant Clarence Earl Dickinson pilot, Scouting Squadron 6, Luke Klein tank, Ensign Willie West pilot, Torpedo Squadron 6, Jake Manley, USS Enterprise, Captain Miles Browning, Halsey's Chief of Staff, Eric Davis, USS Enterprise, Ensign Frank Woodrow O'Flaherty pilot, Scouting Squadron 6, Russell Dennis Lewis, USS Enterprise, Lieutenant Junior Grade Edwin Kroger pilot, Bombing Squadron 6, James Hicks, USS Enterprise, are on the ship as well. Lieutenant Roy Pierce, Alexander Ludwig is the watch officer, USS Arizona when the Jap strikes Pearl Harbor. He goes down with the ship. Vice Admiral William Bull Halsey, Dennis Quaid Commander, Carrier Division 2, gets news of the attack on Pearl Harbor and starts tracking Jap carrier movements, but are unable to pin down their locations. Intelligence says that Japanese attacked with all of their carriers. Before we get on with it, like the video, smash that subscribe button, and turn on the notification bell to join our magical movie family. Meanwhile, Yamamoto is angry that Vice Admiral Kuichi Nagumo, Jun Kunimura, Commander, 1st Air Fleet, Kido Butte, refused to destroy the oil tankers at Pearl Harbor, which would have meant that U.S. operations would have been stopped at Pearl Harbor for over a year. The Japanese turned their attention to occupying the lands, which have the resources they need to fuel their war effort. The role of the Navy is put aside. Meanwhile, the U.S. are focused on destroying the Japanese carrier fleet. On February 1st, Nimitz commands Halsey's battle group to an attack on the Jap positions at Marshall Islands. But the U.S. ammunition disappoints and fails, and their forces are badly and severely outnumbered. But their pilots fight bravely and inflict damage on Jap forces. The Japanese attack the carrier group with their bombers, and one of the machinists, Bruno Gato, uses his fighter's guns on the carrier to starve off a kamikaze attack from a Jap bomber to save the day. In April 1942, following the Doolittle raid, Army bombers on a carrier used to attack the Jap mainland. Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle, Aaron Eckhart, USAF Flight Commander USS Hornet. The Japanese turn their attention to the Coral Sea, as the Japanese believe that U.S. carriers are the only way for the U.S. forces to attack Japan. The Jap fleet destroys one of the U.S. carriers at Coral Sea, and so there are now only two left, USS Hornet and USS Enterprise. Meanwhile, Joseph Rockefort, Brennan Brown, Chief Cryptanalyst, Fleet Radio Unit Pacific, and his cryptology team start intercepting messages concerning a location the Japanese identify as AF. Layton speaks with Nimitz, who tells him that Washington believes AF to be a target in the Aleutians. Layton disagrees, believing the intended target to be Midway Atoll. After meeting with Rockefort, Nimitz instructs the team to find a way to definitively prove that AF is Midway. After Layton instructs Midway to telegraph in the clear, unencrypted, that they are suffering a water shortage, cryptologists working for Rockefort intercept Japanese communications concerning water shortages on AF, thus confirming that AF is Midway. In preparation for an ambush of the Japanese fleet, Nimitz instructs carriers Hornet and Enterprise were called from the Coral Sea and demands that the damaged Yorktown be made ready for combat operations within 72 hours. It is May 28, 1942. On June 4th, The Japanese launch an airstrike against Midway. Initial attempts by U.S. land-based aircraft to strike at the Japanese fleet carriers fails, and no aircraft succeeds in striking a carrier. Nautilus, a U.S. submarine, successfully discovers and attacks an enemy carrier, but the torpedo misses its target. Admiral Koichi Nagumo commands Airshi to keep the submarine pinned down so that the carriers can escape. Meanwhile, U.S. carrier planes are launched in an attempt to destroy the Japanese carriers. After reaching the last known location of the Japanese fleet, the U.S. forces discover the carriers have moved. Upon spotting Arashi, the commander of the air group, CAG, of the Enterprise, C. Wade McCluskey, correctly infers the Japanese destroyer is rushing back to the main Japanese fleet and leads his planes to follow its course. Meanwhile, Admiral Nagumo learns of the presence of the U.S. fleet and orders his men to rearm his planes for anti-ship attack. As his personnel switch out the aircraft ordnance, the U.S. carrier planes suddenly appear. Anti-aircraft fire from ships and Japanese planes combined with evasive maneuvers initially keeps the carriers safe. However, Enterprise squadron commanders C. Wade McCluskey and Richard Halsey Best successfully lead their planes through the anti-aircraft fire and destroy the Japanese carriers, Kaga and Akaji, and squadrons from the Yorktown destroy the Soryu. Attempting to salvage the battle, Hiryu, commanded by Taman Yamaguchi, tries to rally the remaining Japanese aircraft for an assault against the U.S. carriers. Locating Yorktown, the Japanese bomb and disable the carrier. Upon returning to Enterprise, Lieutenant Richard Dick Best, Ed Skrein, Executive Officer, Bombing Squadron 6, USS Enterprise, receives word that about half of his squadron is either missing or destroyed. Knowing that there is a surviving Japanese carrier, Best rallies what pilots he can and sets off to attack Hiryu. Japanese anti-aircraft fire fails to stop the attack, and Best scores a critical hit that destroys Hiryu. Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance, Jake Weber commander, Task Force 16, informed of the destruction of the last Japanese carrier, decides to withdraw for the night, rather than press his luck. Informed of the loss of his carriers in battle, Admiral Yamamoto orders his fleet to withdraw from the battle, rather than risk his battleships without sufficient air cover, thus bringing the Battle of Midway to a close. In Pearl Harbor, Rockefeller intercepts the Japanese order to withdraw, and passes it to Layton, who then informs Nimitz and his staff of Yamamoto's decision to withdraw, and by extension the U.S. victory in the Battle of Midway. Followed by a coda showing the fate. That's all for now. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel for more interesting movies recaps.